Super Rugby Pacific quarter-final time. It's time to do a full-on preview, and I cannot wait to sink my teeth into this. I've done some video analysis at the end of the Brumbies and Hurricanes last time they played, ahead of their fixture this weekend, because it's going to be an absolute gangbuster. It is going to be one of the best games that you will see all season, but then again, all these three finals are going to be of awesome high quality. Now we'll go into them chronologically. So we'll start off on Friday night with the Reds taking on the Crusaders in Christchurch. And I think the main thing that you want to be thinking about this is that the Crusaders are welcoming back three All Blacks: David Havili, Fletcher Newell, and Will Jordan at fullback. That may not necessarily dictate how they attempt to play the game, because they have been pretty consistent throughout the year, regardless of who they've had. But nonetheless, it is an extremely important thing to note that those three players, they're three crucial players, particularly at the scrum for Fletcher Newell, which will be a massive, massive boost to the Crusaders and will be a really big hurdle for the Reds to overcome, who are still missing the players like Alex Hodgman. They've got Jeffrey Tumunga-Allen on the bench, which is a great asset to have, but nonetheless, looking across the propping stocks, the Crusaders have the wood over the Reds there. And so the scrum is going to be a point of extreme pressure for the Reds. And then if we go back to the other replacement, David Havili, who comes back into the fold, extremely important in the midfield for kicking, redirecting attack, and it is going to ultimately come down to where and when Will Jordan decides to inject himself from the back. Josh Flukes for the Reds slots in back into number 13 after a really good performance against the Drua. Dre Pakiho, who's been doing a great job in his stead for his first season at the Reds, slips back to the bench, and then you have a pretty much well-settled side with Ganguno and Anderson on the wings. And the big thing about this game, what it will actually come down to, is the breakdown. So if you look at who is turning over more ball, the Reds are not securing as many of their rucks as the Crusaders are, and they're not securing as many turnovers either. You may get sick of me saying this throughout this video, but breakdown pressure against the New Zealand sides is crucial and is something the Australian sides have lacked. And no one does it better than the Brumbies from the Australian sides, but then again, they are not doing it to a good enough extent. We saw that against the Crusaders, we saw that against the Hurricanes a couple of weeks ago early in the game, and I will show that in the analysis later, but the Reds cannot rely on Fraser McReight just to be the only one to slow down the ball, because we saw what the Crusaders did with good front foot, quick ball, and that led to the Brumbies, again, succumbing to a early first half deficit, like the Reds did against the Hurricanes 2 weeks prior, or prior 2 weeks. So ultimately, this is not really about who has the flashiest breakdown. The Crusaders tend to keep things quite tight and then spread it wide. The Reds are keeping things quite consistently, attacking the midfield, trying to go up through the guts, whether it's via offloads or quick pops or whatever it is. But the battle of the breakdown is what's going to dictate who walks away from this, the victor, because the Reds previously have not been able to effectively slow down play, and because they don't have as much of a rush defense as the Brumbies had against the Crusaders, they're going to have to call on different weapons to be able to slow down their ball effectively if they want to win. Crusaders, they can go from set piece to set piece. The Reds have been particularly bad at the line out over the entirety of the season, like as in overall. The scrum has held up here and there and it's been half decent, but nonetheless, that is going to be an area where a front row of complete All Blacks, Tamati Williams, Cody Taylor, and Fletcher Newell will go to work and try to really pressure and milk penalties out of this, quite frankly, inexperienced Reds front row. And Nick Blomfield, who's on the Pine, has only played 2, I think, or 1 Super Rugby Pacific match. So that is going to be a big challenge for him coming up against the likes of All Blacks in waiting, George Bell, who's at hooker. So it's going to be really, really difficult for the Reds to get any sort of ascendancy in their set piece. So they have to win between the set pieces. They're going to have to kick smart. They cannot feed Will Jordan ball, and you do not want the Crusaders to be able to get an opportunity to go down the blind side, because that's what they will do once they attack an edge with Will Jordan running it back. If you're not going to kick it out and you're not going to limit his options, they will take you to the 15s, and then they'll hammer the blind side, hammer the blind side, hammer the blind side. And then the Reds, it depends on who they have there. Whether Filippo Danguno and Lockie Anderson are up to the challenge. They've definitely proved that they are good in the breakdown area. But nonetheless, it's going to be difficult. It's going to be really difficult for the Reds to contain this Crusaders, particularly in Christchurch, unless more than McReight can get onto the ball. My final prediction is that I think that the Crusaders will win this, but nonetheless, it will come down to an absolute margin of who has quicker breakdown ball and who can disrupt the other person's breakdown the most. And and both sides are quite evenly scaled on the data sets on rucks, penalties, defenders beaten, line breaks, all the things that you want to see that are at the top end of the spectrum. They're all pretty evenly matched, but turnovers and breakdown security is where it's going to really matter the most. And that's where I think the game will go to the Crusaders on the weekend, unless some more people than just Fraser McWright can step up and turn over some pill. One game on Friday, 2 games on Saturday, and we're going to go straight to the Chiefs and the Blues because the Hurricanes versus the Brumbies may end up being a dead rubber within quotation marks, but that is not how Stephen Larkham sees it. And that's what he said as much during this week in press conferences, that he needs his team to focus. This is a finals week, because if the Reds miraculously beat the Crusaders and then the Blues do a number on the Chiefs here, then the Brumbies can't afford to lose. So it is really up to their own futures. They will know, and we'll speak about that a little bit later. I'll come to that. First, we're going to go straight to the Chiefs and the Blues. So in this game, you're going up against 2 teams who go direct very often. Yeah, I know. The stats are a little bit confusing, especially considering the fact that a lot of people assume that the Chiefs go wide and score with the likes of David McKenzie, Imoni Narawa, Daniel Rona, Gideon Rampling, Leroy Carter, one of the chief try scorers in the... That's funny, interesting. Little pun there. One of the best try scorers in the competition. So it'll be really interesting to see what people's reaction is in the comments. So let me know what you think about the comments. They're actually one of the teams that go down the blind side and go direct the most often. So that's close to the ruck. And this is where and how the Blues won the competition last year. But now the Chiefs have been able to remain king and remain top of the log because they have been so good at being direct, and they have been really hard done by in terms of... So the Blues, have been really hard done by. They just haven't been able to staunch that sort of momentum in the blunt confrontation up front against the Chiefs in their last 2 games. Because they have played twice this season. And although one of them was really close, nonetheless, the Chiefs will feel like they have the wood over the Blues in this instance. Now, if we take a quick look at the stat sheet, it's really obvious. The Blues are well behind on all the major stats, and the Chiefs are pretty much leading every single one that you want to be leading. They're still leading for things like tackles made. They are making some of the fewest amount of tackles week in, week out, and that allows you to attack better. You're rejuvenated the following week. Rehab doesn't have to be as good, and even if you do it super well, you recover properly. Whereas the Blues, they're having to make a lot of tackles. Not as many as some of the bottom-dwelling sides, but hence that's why they're in the finals, leading into the pointy end of the season. I think one of the main things that you want to be looking at is the Blues concede about 10 penalties per game, whereas the Chiefs are conceding 8. Now, that may not look a lot like in the grand scheme of things, but I'd like to see what the difference is when it comes to the top matches, because I have seen a couple of high penalty counts from the Blues this season, and the Chiefs, with their dominance around the breakdown and around the contact area, I don't see them conceding a lot on the weekend. That being said, the Blues have powerful runners like Fusi Tua, like Patrick Tuipulotu, like AJ Lamb, and they are going to have to use these players along with the skills of the likes of Rico Ioane and Bowden Barrett and Plummer. It's going to be vital for players like this to be able to generate go-forward ball, not necessarily in the blunt contacts, but when they do get that space, they really do need to make the most of it. I think one of the other things is really interesting is that turnovers conceded, the Blues are one of the sides that concede the least, whereas the Chiefs, they concede about mid-range table. So it's extremely interesting to be able to watch that again. And here I am again mentioning the breakdown, because it's going to be a vital part of the contest. And that will come again later. But nonetheless, it is extremely important to note that this is just merely rucks 1 and turnovers conceded. So they have good security on their own ball, but they haven't necessarily been able to do a lot of it because they're not actually making a lot of line breaks. They're not defeating a lot of defenders. So they're sitting 8th for defenders beaten. They're sitting 10th for line breaks. And they're sitting 11th, dead last for carry meters. Now that actually may refer to territory and possession and where they're getting possession if they're kicking. Nonetheless, it's not a great reflection, whereas the Chiefs are sitting 2nd and 3rd and 1st for some of those stats. So you're going to be looking at an extremely defensive side like the Blues. They're not an all-out attacking side, so it's going to be very much the shield versus the sword, the Blues versus the Chiefs. And I think as far as a prediction goes, I do think that the Chiefs are going to get this done, but I do think that it's going to be a high-quality, close match. I think within about 12 points, just because of how good the Blues have proven to be in tight matches against other great New Zealand opposition like the Crusaders, Hurricanes, etc., and the Chiefs themselves. But nonetheless, I think the Chiefs are just on a tear, and I wouldn't really want to be playing the Blues if any Australian side had to play the Blues in the quarterfinals. But nonetheless, I do think that the Chiefs actually have the wood over the Blues in this instance. So Chiefs go through. And the final match of the weekend, the Brumbies taking on the Hurricanes. It is going to be a stellar game, and I cannot wait for the rematch that happened just a few weeks ago where the Hurricanes came away for the Chocolates and broke a drought in Canberra against the Brumbies. But nonetheless, Stephen Larkham's men are going to have to back it up and be able to do it better than they did last week, because they were oh so close, but that is simply not going to cut it this weekend. It may not be knockout footy, they will know. And so by that time, the likes of Alan Alatoa, who has been selected for this match, if it's just a dead rubber and the Brumbies are going to make it through regardless, maybe they do say that he has a tight calf and they pull him off and they don't play him, because it is crucial that Alan Alatoa is okay for the semi-finals should they make it through, but of course also for the British and Irish Lions tour coming in just a month's time, which is going to be absolutely massive. Then moving on, you're going to be looking at, again, the main focal point of this, and which I'll go through in the analysis, so I'll keep this chat part about the match short. The breakdown will be the end-all and the be-all. And as I mentioned, last time the Hurricanes played, the Brumbies got absolutely romped at the breakdown. They weren't able to slow down any ball. They weren't able to get any pilfers, or very few in that instance. And the Hurricanes kind of had free rein just to do what they want. The defensive shape for the Brumbies, which is an up and in rush defense, was also working quite well initially. But they, as we can see in the analysis in a little while, they just didn't get enough perch and they didn't get enough pay out of actually shutting down the Hurricanes' options. And the Hurricanes were too powerful and too skillful enough to be able to make the most out of those situations when they were kind of caught in a little bit of an awkward situation and they made the Brumbies pay. What's going to be really interesting is now, because the Brumbies against the Hurricanes last weekend, they really shored up their attacking breakdown. Although there were a few turnovers and there were a few counter rucks, they'll be alert to that again this weekend. And it was a stark improvement going back to watch the Hurricanes game compared to the Crusaders game on the weekend. They have shored up a lot of their attacking breakdown as well as their defensive breakdown, which they got more pressure on. The likes of Rory Scott, Luke Reimer, and Luke Reimer, of course, starting this weekend. Extremely important that he does a good job. But like I said, with the Reds, it can't just be up to the number 7. It has to be a cross the team thing. And I think the likes of Nick Frost, Tom Hooper, Billy Pollard, and also James Slipper and Alan Alatoa, they are all very capable of being able to choose their moments to be able to go back and attack the breakdown, and that is something they're going to have to do. Now, if you look at the stat table, the Brumbies are leading a lot of the important points stats, meters carried, etc., etc. The Hurricanes not leading necessarily third or fourth or first or second. The Hurricanes, they're all up there. They're going in between each other. One's higher, one's lower, one's higher, one's lower. And then if you get down to line breaks, this is where the Hurricanes are the deadliest side in the competition. No questions asked. They are making the most line breaks. They're being the most defenders. They're making the second most carry meters alongside the Brumbies. So the Brumbies do carry a lot, and that's why they hold possession. So that's why it stacks up over the time. They're the number 1 side for offloads, and they're number 3 for the Hurricanes and number 2 for the amount of passes. So they are shifting the ball wide, and that is something that I want you to watch in the analysis about where they're going, but also what I want you to think about in the match. The Hurricanes attack down a 15-meter channel, so they have the entire field to be able to set their attacking move, and they often go sideline to sideline. And this was something that they caught out the Brumbies with last time they played, because a few members in the Brumbies side wasn't across or wasn't rushing when they needed to be rushing, and it left huge gaps in center field. And that's why the Hurricanes are one of the sides that attack widest the most, but they also are one of the highest teams. And I'm not talking about just in Super Rugby. I'm talking about in the URC, in the Prem, and the Super Rugby, where all those stats are collated. They attack width and they attack mid of the field, some of them most frequently. And the Brumbies, they attack down the sideline and they attack very direct mid-range. So that back to the issue at hand. If you look at turnovers conceded, the Brumbies have conceded some of the most turnovers at the breakdown. I'd like to say that came from earlier in the season, but nonetheless, that stat still stands. And then if you go to the Hurricanes, they're sitting at second. So they have conceded some of the least at the breakdown. that goes to show you where the vision from in the analysis in a little while goes to, and then how that's developed throughout the season. They are absolutely meticulous on their own ball and on their attacking ball, and getting, because their connection with their truck and trailer and with their in their 3-man pods is so good. Whereas the Brumbies, they are a little bit disconnected. Players are running a little bit all over the place, and so therefore the cleaner and the securer, they are not knowing where the Brumby attacking player with the ball is going to go, and so that actually limits their ability to be able to clean and secure effectively. And then if you go to set piece, the Brumbies have the wood over the they have the wood over the Hurricanes in both the line out and also the scrum. But that is going to be a big point of contention with Xavier Nomia and power scrummager and player Asafa Omua back in the squad. All the stats on the table are not going to be able to tell you that the Brumbies are going to win this game by going to set piece, and being able to keep the tension on the Hurricanes, but they're going to have to play fewer. They're going to have to play fewer phases, because the likes of Duplessis, Karifi, Flanders, Delaney, Asafa Omua, Xavier Numia, Billy Proctor, another player that I didn't mention who's extremely dangerous and powerful, Punivai, they are all, and Finia Ganofo, who's another power winger, who's on there instead of Kinina Holo. They are all threats over the ball. And this is going to be really, really dangerous for the Brumbies, because they can't sustain the same amount of high phase count if they're not securing their ball and they're not going forward. So little kicks are going to be important, just nailing the Hurricanes down, frustrating them. That's the tactics that they're going to have to go. No high phase count against the Hurricanes. They are simply too dangerous. And then vice versa. The Hurricanes are going to want to make sure that they have a high phase count, because they can generate that quick ball. And I give a really good example in the first video analysis piece that I do just after this. I have to give my prediction, though. I do think the Brumbies will win. They have learnt their lessons. It's a lot easier to learn lessons and then go to perfect them, which they have showed again against the Crusaders last week, than it is to have a great performance that wins a couple of weeks back and then go back to think, how can we do that better? We just did the exact same thing. The Brumbies will have improved. The Hurricanes are a great side, but I think nonetheless, Stephen Larkham and his men do not want to lose this just based on momentum. You don't want 2 losses on the trot heading into a crucial semi-final clash all across the ditch. In this instance, it's Tua Lima, the new man from the Melbourne Rebels, who's not entirely equated with the rush defense, who leaves a massive gap in midfield. Although it's not an entirely clean play, they nevertheless find the mismatch out wide. And that is because Alan Alatoa, a front rower, is defending next to a second rower who's been caught short. And then David Feliwai has to feather and decide whether he stays close to Alatoa to prevent a Proctor or a Higgins going through the center, or also blocking the space going out wide. Thanks so much for watching that, guys. I really appreciate it. And I think a lot of you guys are enjoying the content from what I can see in the comments, and also on my social media on X. You can follow me there. It'll be down in the description below, as well. It'll be my Rugby Pass profile. But if you are really enjoying it, please think about hitting that subscribe button. It helps me to be able to continue to grow the channel and to be able to reach more rugby lovers like you. And the subscription and a like is really the 2 things that help this channel grow. So if it's not too much to ask from you guys, hit the subscribe button so then you know what's coming up. Wallabies depth chart coming out very, very soon in the next couple of days. And then after that, we'll head into more interviews and more different types of content leading into the British and Irish Lions tour. But for this weekend, please enjoy your quarterfinals for Super Rugby Pacific and all over the world. Enjoy your rugby. If you're watching this, welcome to the Australian Rugby channel, Off the Ruck, your weekly rugby breakdown. And fingers crossed that we get some good results across the weekend here. And enjoy your rugby, and I'll see you next week for a wrap and a preview of what's to come on the channel.